You're listening to Speaking Of by WFSU Public Media. Leon County schools begin their new school year next week. And with the new school year comes renewed issues of teacher shortages and budget difficulties. Gina Jordan is talking with Leon County School Superintendent Hanna to learn more about what administrators have been preparing for this upcoming school year.
Hi, I'm Gina Jordan, Morning Edition host here at WFSU Public Media. Today, we are speaking of the new school year and the future of public schools. Most school districts around the Big Bend start the academic year this coming Monday. That includes Leon, which, like districts statewide, is having to contend with less funding, higher expenses, and a worker shortage. Leon Superintendent Hanna has butted heads with the DeSantis administration over a variety of issues: masks during the pandemic, disagreements over LGBTQ+ policies, and school choice. He is starting this school year with optimism while looking at a bleak horizon for public schools. We chatted over Zoom last Friday.
Let's talk about money. I know there have been some changes and some tweaks. Are you guys going into the school year with a shortage?
Well, we really had to throw a Hail Mary this year to kind of keep things status quo. Yeah, we had a shortage, but there are two driving forces. One, from the state legislature, we received basically the same funding this coming year that we did last year. I think there was like 0.7% of an increase. But on the expense side of the ledger, we had over $6 million more of expenses. Our health insurance went up by $3.2 million. Our contract with the Sheriff's Department for deputies in our schools went up by $400,000. Our contract with the Leon County Health Department for school nurses went up by $400,000. Our utilities are going to increase by $700,000-800,000. Our contributions to Florida retirement system went up. So when you're revenue neutral and then your expenses go up a little over $6 million, you start off in a deficit. Now, on the other side of the equation, this summer we were notified that a number of our federal grants were being frozen. That was another $6 million. And so we scrambled the employees that were being paid out of those grants. We put them in different positions in the county that were open at the time, teaching positions and counselor positions and things like that. And then, the federal government comes back and goes, just kidding. Here's your money back for your after school programs. And to answer your question, yeah, we're still that $6 million on the general operating side. We're down. The only way that we could balance our budget this year, we're required by law to have a 3% unrestricted fund balance, basically like a savings account. For us, that's around a little over $11 million that we have to keep in a reserve. The only way we could do that was to move our bus driver salaries out of the general operating expenses to be paid out of capital outlay dollars. Now, capital outlay dollars are dollars that are used for new construction, remodel, renovation, school bus replacement, instructional technology, all of our kids' devices, and we generate around $60 million in capital outlay between the half-penny sales tax and then our 1.5 millage. By law, you were only allowed to pay certain salaries out of there. Some of your maintenance worker salaries could be paid out of there, and some of your facilities people. So we moved about $7.5 million out of capital outlay to pay for bus driver salaries to offset that increase in expenses. But that's a card we can only play once. So we're hearing from the legislature that the budget situation is not good. Once all that federal money flushed through the system, that there are budget issues statewide, which is why I assume that we only saw 0.7% increase. If we end up revenue neutral again and not funded at the proper levels by the legislature, and we know we're going to have a rise of expenses again next year, I don't know what we'll do.
So you're having to make magic, but you also have these restrictions that you're working under.
This was one of those cases where we didn't know what we were going to do. They were still withholding the other money for professional development and teacher training, money that was helping work with our ESOL students, our students who were learning to speak English. And what we were told was they wanted to ensure that districts were not using those dollars for DEI to enhance or promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in any way. And once they were assured that Leon County wasn't trying to use that money for diversity, equity, and inclusion, they'd give us the money. And then we had to sign off, with our blood that, yes, Father, we won't use that money for any of those nasty words.
You talked about how there was going to be a shortage and you shifted some people into different roles and then you got some money back. Like you said, you shifted some people into teaching positions. Did you then pull them out and put them back where they were?
No, we couldn't do that. That would have been even more of a mess. And I think some of our people were upset that we didn't, but those dollars were just released last Friday. So 3 days before teachers reported, and we had already put those people in those positions. Well, then we couldn't pull them out of those teaching positions. But then we have vacancies. And kids would come to class with no teacher. So it just created a mess.
I checked the Leon County Schools website, the employment website, and I don't know how up to date it is, but it shows there's still dozens of job openings for instructional staff. Is that still true?
It is. We met the other day. I believe we had between 70 and 80. We have a teacher shortage crisis. We have for several years, especially post-COVID. It's just, you see young people, a lot of them just don't want to get in this profession. The pay is one thing, but now you have all these horrible things being said by the governor and other elected officials, how public school teachers are grooming kids and indoctrinating kids. And, if you don't want to go to the government school, we'll give you a voucher to go to the private school down the street for free. And a lot of these young people are like, I'm not getting in the middle of that mess, not for $47,000. We had a beginning teacher boot camp to give them some really highly intensive professional development, and they were really excited. They were young. It reminded me of myself 38 years ago when I was a beginning teacher at Godby High School. We do have a number of people that are still, they care about our community, and more importantly, they care about our children, which are really the future of our community and in our country.
So what happens if you go into day one of the school year, you still have dozens of teacher vacancies, but you also have requirements put on you in state law about class sizes and that sort of thing? What do you do?
It's $1 million question. So we just do the best we can. I mean, last year we did end up starting the school year with some substitute teachers in classes and paraprofessionals until we were able to secure a certified teacher. But it took us a little while. But if you put things in context, we have over 2,000 teachers. So while 70 to 80 may sound like a big number in the big scheme of things, it's not. But one is too many. I remember years ago when I was the principal at Leon High School, every spring and early summer, we'd have a hiring fair at the Civic Center. Hundreds and hundreds of young applicants would come and apply for those jobs. And you really have the pick of the litter. I mean, you'd have 6 or 7 people applying for every job. Well, now you open those doors and there's no one there. It breaks my heart. It just breaks my heart. And when I first became superintendent 8 years ago, when I would go to these beginning teacher workshops and I'd ask them, I say, well, how many of you are a non-college of education major, meaning their degree was in business or in computer science or something like that, but they decided they wanted to teach, maybe 15% of the hands would go up. This past Monday, I went in and I said, well, how many of you are non-college of ed majors? Well, almost 70% of the hands went up. So more often than not, we find ourselves teaching teachers how to teach while they're teaching. So it's almost like, building the bike while we're riding the bike.
That's really interesting. So the bulk of your new teachers had a different career and they decided, I'll go get a teaching certificate or whatever the state requires. And now they're going to come in and be a new teacher or something that they had probably not even thought about until they made this decision.
Yeah, it's funny. Last year, 2 years ago, I went to a 3rd grade class and the teacher was having some classroom management issues and I helped calm the class down. And after school, she had no idea who I was. And I told our principals at the beginning of the year, if they needed a mental health day or a day off, that I would come be the principal for the day, which I loved, being back around the kids. And so I went to this elementary school when I was principal for the day. And that 3rd grade teacher, she had just started in January. And she comes to me after school. She says, Mr. Hanna, I'm sorry, I had no idea who you were. And thank you so much for helping me and coming in the class. And I said, let me ask you a question. Are you a college of ed major? And she said, no, sir, I majored in biology. And I said, So you didn't do an internship or anything? And she said, no, sir. So the last time that girl was in a third grade classroom was when she was in third grade. So
Wow.
it's just hard. And you have colleges of education that are withering on the vine. Thankfully, TSC now has an elementary education program and bachelor's degree. Florida State, A&M, colleges across the country, their colleges of education are struggling. And I don't know how we change that. Well, one way to change it is, in the state of Florida, we can't rank 50th out of 50 states in average teacher pay. I mean, that's ridiculous. Darrell Jones, our school board member, one of his favorite quotes is, and I love it, is you want to see someone's priorities, look at their checkbook. So if you want to see the priorities of the state of Florida, look at their checkbook. What greater investment could we make than in the future of our state? Whether they're 7 years old or 12 years old, that is the future of the state of Florida. Why wouldn't we invest as much as we possibly could to ensure that the future of our state and our county and our community is going to be thriving over the next century? It just doesn't make any sense.
You said you'll do everything you can to protect the classroom. And it sounds like that's getting harder and harder, but can you talk a little bit about what is still on the table for elimination or reduction?
We, over the last 3 years, had around $100 million that ran flushed through the Leon County School District of federal money. And we used those dollars to buy additional people. We bought guidance counselors, to have a second guidance counselor at all of our elementary schools. We bought social workers. We bought academic interventionists to do pullouts and push-ins with kids that were suffered academic regression as a result of the pandemic. So we invested in probably 150 or 160 positions. Once those dollars went away in September of 24, this last year, about 60 to 70 of those we were able to keep: the additional guidance counselor, the social workers, because we know kids are dealing with a lot more mental health issues post-pandemic than we saw prior to the pandemic. We were able to keep 2 of the 3 academic interventionists in our elementary schools. And that's, I think, why you've seen our school grades take off. You saw Sable Palm went from a D to an A. Pineview was a B. Bond was a B. Riley was a B. Rudiger was an A, hadn't been an A in 20 years. A lot of that was because of these academic interventionists. But now, unfortunately, I don't know that we're going to be able to sustain that. I just don't want to compromise the services that we need to provide as far as transportation and food service and things like that. We'll continue to try to hold the classroom harmless as long as we possibly can. But I have to, during the course of this year, find between $5 and $6 million in case we get level funding from the legislature, which we fully expect. Again, on August the 11th, we won't borrow worry, as one of my assistant superintendents says. 30,000 kids are going to come rushing in, and we're going to provide them high quality and enriching education, and provide them everything they need to have a successful school year.
It sounds like you don't have any hope really that the funding situation will improve next year or beyond.
No,
Is that true?
I don't. I mean, the problem is, Gina, there's just, now that we're funding the voucher program, there's just not enough money. I mean, the voucher program statewide is $3.8 billion. For us in Leon County, $37 million is going to support private schools in Leon County. There's just not enough money to fund 2 parallel programs. So you have the traditional public schools that are held to this very high standard, very high level of accountability. There's an entire chapter of Florida statutes that govern traditional public schools, but then we send $3.8 billion statewide to private schools that have zero accountability and zero requirements. The teachers don't have to be certified. They don't have to serve students with special needs. I mean, we even locally now, I've seen a charter school shut down in Leon County because of low enrollment numbers. They've turned it over to a private school. The private school is going to take the $8,000 voucher. They're going to add a $3,000 tuition on top of it to keep any poor kids from being able to attend the school. They're going to make kids take assessments. In order to qualify, they have to be a level 4 or level 5 to qualify to gain entry into the school. They don't serve students with special needs, and they don't serve ESOL students. You're just seeing a systematic dismantling of public schools, because if we continue to bleed money the public school system will be left with economically disadvantaged kids and kids with profound special needs that no one else is going to serve them. I've been in this community my entire life. I'm a product of our public schools. This is my 38th year with our school district. And I'm always a glass half full person. But right now, it's just hard to see it half full because I'm just staring at the empty part of it.
I can see that this is weighing on you. Has there been a net drop in students in Leon because of vouchers?
Yeah, post-COVID, we've seen declining enrollment with the expansion of the voucher program. And this year, I think statewide, they were predicted that traditional public schools would lose between 27 and 28,000 students, and the voucher program was going to grow by 88,000 students. It used to be the vouchers would only go to kids who were leaving public school and going to private school. Well, now they're funding everybody. So you could have a kid that's been in a private school their entire time, never been in a public school. Now they're receiving the scholarships. Kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, I went to Blessed Sacrament Catholic School here in Tallahassee. But there was never an expectation from my mother and father that the taxpayers of Leon County would pay for Rocky to go to Catholic school and to go to Mass on Wednesday and all. They knew that if they wanted to send me to Catholic school or to private school, fine, but they were going to have to pay for it. Well, that's no longer true anymore. There's just an unlevel playing field. And I would put our schools, our traditional public schools, up against anybody. But you can't tie one hand behind our back and hold us all of these levels of accountability and school grades and everything else, but yet that doesn't apply to them. Well, if you're sending taxpayer dollars to these schools, yes, it should apply to them. How do the taxpayers know what they're investing in? They don't. This is my worst fear come true. Do you ever see the movie The Perfect Storm? That movie with George Clooney?
Yeah.
The Andrea Gale goes out on a fishing trip. You had a hurricane coming out of the south up the East Coast, and then coming out of the north, out of Canada, you had a nor'easter, right? Mm-hmm. And the boat was caught in the middle. Well, the hurricane coming out of the south is a voucher program, is money for parents to send kids to private schools. And the nor'easter coming down out of the north are all of the horrible things being said by our governor and other elected officials about public schools and how the government schools are indoctrinating kids and grooming kids and all this nonsense about gender and just crazy stuff. But words matter. Words matter. So when people hear the governor and even at times the commissioner of education say about things that are going on in the public schools, young parents are like, forget that. I'm not sending my kid to that school. I'm going to take the voucher and go to the private Christian school down the street where they aren't turning girls into boys and boys into girls and all this other stuff. So we now find ourselves in the public school system that we are the Andrea Gale. And we're in the perfect storm. We're just trying to get back to shore. But it gets harder and harder. And every year I'm reminded when I go to the Best and Brightest ceremony or graduations and our kids are leaving and they're going to MIT and they're going to Yale and they're going to Harvard, Florida Honors Program, or they're going to a trade in a technical school or in the military. We do an amazing job, no matter where a kid is academically when they come to us, of preparing them academically for whatever their next is in life. And there's a lot of stress. Those principals I was talking, when you get the grades and the teachers, how their kids perform on the state assessments, those schools don't have to worry about any of that. None of it. But that is the new reality for public school principals, for public school teachers. And they get up each and every day to make a child's life better and to help a child succeed. And why we've now, after COVID, started attacking public schools and public school teachers, I don't get it. I really don't. I remember I had a conversation with Senator Simon here locally, and I respect Senator Simon. We obviously strongly disagree philosophically with the voucher program, but there was a sense that during COVID, when we asked our teachers in the fall of 2020, when we reopened our schools and we said, okay, well, if you need your child to come to school, you want to come to school, our doors are open. If you don't feel good and you want your child to stay at home, we'll bring the classroom to you. So I asked my wife, Christy, who's a sixth grade science teacher, and all of our other teachers to teach what we called the hybrid model, where half of their kids were physically in class and half of their kids were remoting into class. They've never been trained in that. They had no idea how to deal with that situation. But yet some elected officials including Senator Simon at the time, said the curtain was revealed. The parents got to see really what was going on in the classroom during COVID. I'm like, are you kidding? That's how you're going to evaluate our teachers in the middle of a crisis where they're fearing for their own health, the health of themselves, the health of their family. They're doing the best they can and we moved to block scheduling. They had never been trained on that, to cut down on the transition times that we were having in our schools. They had never been trained on any of this. And that's how you're going to evaluate our teachers during the middle of a COVID crisis? That's just ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, it feels like you kind of have the weight of the world on your shoulders right now. Anything you want to leave us with?
Well, look, my father named me Rocky for a reason. And I'm not going down without a fight. Job one for me as superintendent of schools is to protect our children and our employees from harm each and every day, to make sure they're safe. Job two, though, is to be the biggest fan and the biggest cheerleader I can and advocate for public education and to support our public schools. And I will continue to be that guy for the next, 3+ years that I'm in this office, Lord willing. I'm not going down without a fight. I hope one day that they'll see that it doesn't work. It's not going to work unless your goal really is to dismantle public education. At the end of this summer, we were sent a letter that cut us another $500,000 because they couldn't account for all the kids that were in the voucher program. So they cut districts across the state of Florida a total of 47 or 48 million because they just couldn't track them all. It's a mess. And a lot of parents, how parents are, they think my kid's on scholarship to go to the private school. It's different. Well, different doesn't mean better. Different is just different. A lot of times when those kids go to these private schools, they come back to us, they are way behind. But they're earning all A's, and the parents go, well, they were getting straight A's in the private school. I don't understand what's going on. Yeah, they were getting straight A's. They want to keep you happy. You're paying their tuition. And then that's one thing they don't see with the state assessments. Yeah, we're held accountable. You see that everything's open. With these private schools, all bets are off. But 30,000 kids are going to come back eager to learn, eager to see their friends, and we're going to provide a wonderful education, continue to support the arts and athletic programs and everything we've been doing until we just financially can't do it anymore.
Well, you have an exciting new year about to start, and we wish you and everyone at the district all the best.
Well, I wish you the best too, Gina. And I can't thank you enough and WFSU enough for all that you do to support our public schools and public education. This is why I've been in our community, never left, wouldn't live anyplace else. So thank you for having me today.